Welcome to the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, the bi-weekly show that brings you the best of powerlifting in Canada. Our three co-hosts include Ryan Stinn, holder of the heaviest equipped squat in total in Canada, as well as owner of Unparalleled Training Center and co-owner of Inner Strength Products. Steve Cassioli, IPF world record holder and medalist, the third strongest classic lifter in Canadian history, and owner of Cassioli Strength and Conditioning. Lastly, Avi Silverberg, world team coach and world bench press medalist, owner of PursuitOfStrength.com, a site dedicated to coaching and education for powerlifters. Today's episode starts right now.
Season 2 of the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast is brought to you by LVD Fitness. LVD Fitness is a powerlifting apparel brand that donates 1 month of clean water to a child in need for every item sold. Follow them on Instagram and Facebook at LVD Fitness to join the movement.
Hello and welcome to the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, Season 2. We have a fantastic episode for you this week. I was down in Los Angeles and was able to sit down with two fantastic athletes, Mallory Rowan and Maggie Morgan. They were down in LA hanging out. I was with them. We decided to put together a podcast episode. Mallory is our season sponsor, co-owner of LVD Fitness. She shares some really cool kind of behind-the-scenes information with LVD Fitness, kind of what she's done and where she plans on going with that. And then Maggie is part of our CPU national team, traveling down to Texas, competing in the 63-kilo junior category, and we catch up with her on her training and how her prep is going and some of the things that she is looking to do down there in Texas. So fantastic episode. Before we roll into it, though, we want to do our draw for Brittany Bergen's nutritional ebook called Your Last Nutrition Program. She has not released this ebook yet, but 3 of our listeners who have entered is going to receive an early copy of this ebook. It's fantastic. I've mentioned this before. On our previous episode, Brittany sent me the first 15 pages of her ebook, and it is absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to turn it over to Ryan here to do the draw.
Yeah, so we did a draw for 3 different people that entered last week, and the winners are Nicole Sopyk, I think I'm saying that right, S-O-P-Y-C, Shara Audi, and Morgan Cahill. So I'll be in touch with all 3 of you this week and get you in touch with Brittany so she can pass that along to you.
And we had a number of entries coming in for that. I think there was over 40 athletes interested in her ebook, so we can't wait for you to give us some feedback after you've read it, and we'll share that feedback on the podcast. And we have some great topics today to talk about in our Coast to Coast bi-weekly powerlifting wrap-up. So this week on the wrap-up, we want to talk about 2 topics. We had a lifter this week drop out of off the national team, Josh Hancock, and he put out a video of some of the reasons why he dropped off the national team and why he needed to take a little bit of a break from powerlifting. Now, we don't want to make this about Josh, but there are some really interesting topics that everybody goes through in the course of their powerlifting career that we wanted to discuss and talk about and have a little conversation about. So the first is we want to talk about injury. And it was actually really interesting because I woke up this morning and I read a post from Brody Labelt. If you don't know who Brody is, he runs a club up in Cold Lake, Alberta, and he's been around for a few years, and he's been dealing with some injuries over the last year and a half. He competed at the World Championships last year in Finland, was dealing with some injuries, and just since then, over the last year, he's kind of had to modify and adapt his training and, modify and adapt his training in order to continue to see progress. And so his perspective, I put out this really long post on Facebook. I'll read a couple of sentences of it. He says, "It is super easy to get in the gym when you're making linear gains. It's even easier to be motivated during that time, but it's incredibly hard to look at the big picture when things are going that well. I pushed and pushed, every workout I did like it was do or die, and I was making fantastic progress. I was hitting rep maxes often, PRing up to 5 to 6 times a week. The people with a more conservative training approach thought I was crazy, and I thought they were just being pussies because they were weaker than me. LOL, he says. Then the injury came. There were days I couldn't deadlift a plate. I would lighten the load, ramp things up too fast with my bullish mindset, and things would flare up again. In that time, a lot of those conservative quotations pussies started passing me one by one. I was beyond frustrated, and then I finally swallowed my ego and started looking at patterns in lifters that did well in meets, lifters that underperformed when it really counted, and he puts in brackets me, lifters that progressed consistently meet to meet, and lifters that had unpredictable meets or even got worse. I looked at the ways they trained, how they approached training, how they approached meets. There was definitely a trend, and it all came down to one thing: mindset. So Ryan, we know we've talked on the podcast before about how you have had some incredible injuries, myself too, which I'll share with everybody. But for you, you've had an injury. It's a massive injury. You continued on training, and in fact, you only got a squat PR for the first time in 6 years, 5 or 6 years last year at Nationals, and that's the kind of stuff that I really want to get into in terms of the mindset. I mean, how do you deal with that sort of prolonged injury and having to kind of train through it, train around it, modify, and continue on so you can still see progress?
That's a good question. I can't say I did that continually for 6 years. I definitely had some dark days where I just didn't worry about it, where for months on end I trained, I still went to the gym, but it certainly wasn't my top priority anymore. And it just, you get demotivated when you have injuries and when you can't seem to make progress or you can't even start stepping in the right direction. For me, it was a lot of, like Brody said, you'd start feeling better, you'd start pushing, and then you'd be back at square one again. But because I couldn't squat, like I just didn't care about anything else. Squat's always been my favorite lift, and once that was, my big injury causer, I basically lost motivation and lots of other things. So, all my lifts went down, but nowadays I have a different perspective on it. I re-aggravated my injury back in December, and then again in January, and I kind of took that time to focus more on bench, to focus on a few other things. But I still train 6 days a week. I think it is tough. It's when it's something you truly love to do, and then you can no longer do it, it's going to be hard on your mindset, right? You see us a lot of times that people will take up a different sport, or I've seen people that start doing weightlifting because it doesn't hurt their back or their whatever. So I understand that it's lots of times easier to avoid it and go elsewhere without ever kind of find the root cause. So it was probably 2 or 3 years before I really committed myself to figuring out the problem. Like I would get massages every now and then and chiro and stuff and trying to figure it out, but it wasn't until like two years into the injury where I was really like, enough is enough, and it's time to figure this out. So
when you're in the trenches, when you're dealing with the injury and you're feeling pain, you can't do what you want to do, when you're saying to yourself, well, I'm not able to hit the numbers that I want to be hitting, like how do you deal with that as an athlete? Like how do you turn your focus onto your training when mentally you say to yourself, I'm not hitting the numbers that I want to be hitting? Like that can be really hard for a competitive athlete. That can be really hard for somebody who wants to be the best. Like how do you deal with that?
Like I say, I'm in that situation. Like I did tweak my back a couple weeks ago, and I was out. Like I haven't had any crazy big injuries, but like tweaking my back, I wasn't able to squat for like a couple weeks and stuff. And I know like leading up to last year, like Commonwealth time, even Worlds, I was hitting like triples, I don't know, maybe like 495, and like this time around I'm like 475-ish, so a little lighter. But I mean, looking at it, like that definitely messes with me mentally. Oh, I hit 495 for some triples before. I'm like, I must be a lot further behind now. But actually looking at it, hitting those triples, grinding them out, now looking back at hitting maybe 30, 40 pounds less, it's a lot more like comfortable, smooth, no form breakdown, which I'm not injured. I feel great now. So like looking at the number, I think that's the biggest thing that messes with people mentally, rather than looking at how's your technique changed, how fast are your reps moving now, like no form breakdown. I think that's the bigger thing, because like, yeah, I don't care that I hit 495 because I know my form is a lot better, and when I'm on the platform, if I have to grind something on the platform, I can do it, right?
Yeah, that's a great perspective. I like how you actually turn your mindset away from looking at and defining your success as the absolute number that's on the bar, to looking at other things like, okay, how does my technique look compared to 6 months ago or a year ago? Am I making technical adaptations? How's the speed on the bar? Like, is the bar moving quicker? Is it moving with more proficiency, with more ease? How does it just feel on my body? Like, am I able to move near maximal weights and have it not feel like a grind, or not have it feel so painful? Because we can all put lifts on the bar where it's like, I kind of feel my pecs on this, and it might be, even if you were just to bring the bar back 10 pounds and not experience that level of pain, that's all a positive way to have your mindset around your training. And I remember hearing back Adam Ramsey we had on the podcast, and he said that one of the things that he does when he's ramping up to his top sets, he's constantly evaluating. And, if you do, let's say, 217 kilos that day, and the program calls for 225, and you kind of stop it at 217 because you don't want to push to that extra little bit, your body's probably not going to know the difference. One workout out of the 20 workouts that you do in the month, if you modify that one workout, it's really not going to have a great impact probably on the back end, because you're continuously able to move forward and make progress and not have to take those steps back. Now, I'm going to say something fairly provocative here, and I want to get your guys' opinion on this. I asked this when we had Otis on the podcast talking about his experience with rehab and prehab and all that stuff. But my perspective is, okay, now when we train for powerlifting, you can train for powerlifting to get stronger and to be healthy and to be to increase strength and to see all those sorts of benefits that you get from weight training. But when you start to become a competitive powerlifter, you want to win provincials, you want to win the nationals or place at nationals, you want to go off and compete on international teams. It's an extreme sport, and I don't care what sport that you're involved in. If you want to do it to the extreme level, there's going to be injury, and I think that injuries are unavoidable. I think that it's over time, if you are going to be pushing yourself in powerlifting for 3, 4, 5 years, you are going to get an injury. I don't think powerlifting causes injury. I think it's that if you are going to compete at the highest level in any sport, powerlifting being one of them, you're going to get injuries. And that's all part of the game. And so I don't know what you guys think about that, but if you haven't had an injury and you're trying to be the best powerlifter possible, it's coming. It's coming down the pipe. It's something that everybody's going to have to deal with. In my opinion, it's as predictable as any other component of powerlifting. What do you guys think about that?
I think, I think you're right. I mean, whether major or minor, you're gonna experience something at some point, right? You are pushing yourself to the limit. You're not pacing all the time, right? But one thing that I see a lot, and I see it on a lot of Instagram stars, is people who sacrifice form for pounds, and that is a recipe for disaster. I think a lot of people watch my training and say, why is it so easy? Why does it look so easy? Why did you go heavier? And like Steve said, I mean, it's all about smoothness and proficiency. Like, I don't want to really go above. I don't want to hit something that I grind, especially squatting or deadlifting. I'm not durable anymore. My back isn't durable, and I'm not willing to try and grind something and potentially lose position and cause something to go again. So I think you're far better off to stay within both pain-free range of motion and a rep quality, a movement quality, weight range. Like, I wouldn't recommend you push to a 9.5 RPE just so you can grind it out with a rounded back just to get a 5-pound PR.
I agree. I definitely have experienced like that in the past. Like, looking back on my training leading up to last year's Worlds, I mean, I was just going for like a 5-rep like squat PR. Like, I did hit it, but I was maybe good morning a little bit. So looking back at that, it's like, definitely put my back into some crazy situations. But going back to the question, yeah, powerlifting does definitely do some wear and tear on your body, and I think it's the athletes that are getting to the top are the ones that are, I don't know, doing everything they can. So like starting right from, I think, I don't know, doing your proper warm ups. Like everyone needs a good warm up, whether it's just whatever your regular routine is, to making sure all your reps are of quality, right? Technical proficiency, and even like cooling down and the stuff. Like Otis mentioned too, like are you sitting down all day at your job? Like all that stuff, and are you, I don't know, like something, if you do feel something out of whack, like are you getting it looked at, or are you kind of just like pushing it off, and then all of a sudden it's gonna pop up and then you're out for even longer, right? So just being aware of, being aware of when you're sore, you have those little aches and pains, are they necessary to get treated, like get looked at? So I don't know, it's tough, but injury, you can prevent it. You could prevent it from happening, but it's definitely, in this sport,
in any sport,
in high level, you're prone to, have that injury.
One of the things that I have appreciated over the years of powerlifting, this is my 10th year involved in the sport, is that when you have a pain, you can actually fit that pain or that tweak within a context of all of your other pains and tweaks that you've had before, to actually know, okay, is this something serious that I actually need to modify, or if I actually need to pull back on? Mm-hmm. Or is this something where it's like, oh no, this is something that I can push on or continue doing the reps and the sets as prescribed? I can't tell you how knowing my body and having that context of whether this is good or bad or something that I can work past, that's been such a valuable sort of experience that maybe some newer lifters who have only been in the sport a couple of years don't have. One of the things that I will say before we wrap up this conversation on injury is that when we had Bryce Krawczyk on the podcast talking about RPE style training, and his approach to building up to some of these top sets, is that his RPE system is only based on perfect execution of the movements. So a 9 RPE has to be a 9 RPE within perfect execution. It's not a 9 RP within a grind or with misgrooving the rep or with losing integrity in your spine. It's within good form, and I think that's also a good point to remember. Now, I do want to talk about a second topic that that kind of leads into or kind of builds off of this idea of injuries, and that's athlete burnout. Now, athlete burnout, in my opinion, it can be caused by or due to the fact that you have an injury, but I would characterize it as more of an emotional or psychological exhaustion due to the stress that the sport causes or the activity causes. So let's talk a little bit about the emotional side of training at a high level. I know that we all have commitment to the sport and we've made sacrifices, but how do you actually go about maintaining a healthy emotional state or a healthy psychological state as you train at a high level, Ryan?
Well, I mean, you don't always. I don't think. I think at some point there are points in my lifting career, even recently, where I'm going in and doing the work, right? I love the sport, I really do, but sometimes it's a job and I'm going to do the work I have to do. I remember someone posted something about motivation on Facebook, and I replied saying, I haven't been motivated for the last month, but I still train 6 days a week because that's my job. I want to get better. I am motivated to get better. But, and as a kid, I remember all my coaches when I played baseball or whatever, they all complained because I didn't want to practice. I never want to do the practice, I just want to play the games. And that's how it is sometimes, right? You just want to compete. You don't want to put the work in to train. I mean, powerlifting is hard, man. It's hard. Like one competition every 12 weeks sounds great, but that means you have to put in 4, 5, 6 days a week training up to that. So you put in a lot of hours to get better, and especially as you get better in the sport. Once you stop making gains instantly by touching a bar, it's hard to keep that same motivation, right? So I mean, I think you have to be realistic that you're not always gonna be, 100% motivated to go kill it every day. But
I think it's totally unrealistic to think that you got to be beast mode all the time going to your workouts. Like, I know that you said that you treat it like a job, and that's fantastic. I almost treat it like brushing my teeth in the morning. Like, I'm not overly motivated to brush my teeth in the morning, but I do it anyways. It has to be done, or I'm going to have bad breath. So, I don't have to find motivation to do it. I just do it because it's part of my routine in order to work towards that end goal. Steve, what do you think?
No, I agree. Like, you're definitely going to have those days where you're, I don't know, a little more amped up to train, right? Like, some days when you have, like, a lot of volume to do, you're like, okay, screw this. I don't want to go do all this. Or, like, for me anyways, like, honestly, I do, like, the first, like, say if I'm doing 5 sets, like, the first 4, I'm just like, oh, this sucks. My last one, I'm like, you know what? I have 1 more to go. Let's do this. Then I'm, like, jacked up, right? Just get it done. But, yeah, you're going to have good days, bad days. And, I mean, I think the biggest thing is definitely, yeah, just, you're overthinking it, right? Or it's like, oh, I should be motivated for this workout. Like, I should be loving this. But, I mean, the process is tough. Like, to be an elite athlete, I mean, you have to, the biggest thing is being able to cope with those, like, down days. Yeah, like you said, I haven't hit a PR in, I don't know, like a while. Probably not as long as you, Ryan. You said, like, it was, like, 6 years, right? Mm-hmm. But, I mean, even still a while. But, yeah, mentally, that definitely affects you mentally, and you're just like, hey, you have to kind of rethink, why am I doing this? Do I enjoy this? And I get why people, like, they crash or they just can't deal with it. But I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, you gotta love the sport. You're gonna have those tough days, but it's the process, right? I mean, to be at that high level, it's like you gotta go through all that, and the biggest thing is being able to cope with those rough days, right?
Yeah, you have to love the process, and you also have the process involve those bad days, and it involves challenges. Like, you have to love challenges and overcoming challenges. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I do want to bring up before we close is the idea of having certain priorities in your life at certain time periods. Right? So you have to have this kind of harmonious balance. You can't be obsessed with powerlifting all of the time, 365, 7 days a week. Like, if you're prepping for a world, Steve, as you know, like, you've gone through 2 world championship cycles, like, okay, the 12 to 16 weeks from nationals to worlds, like, that is your priority. And you might make more sacrifices and have, more commitment during that time frame. But following worlds, you might make room in your life where you have priorities on other things, so that there is a balance, so that you're not completely identifying and having your identity and your sole purpose in life around powerlifting.
Yeah, like, right? Still doing, like, this is the biggest thing, having that balance, right? Like, I'm not, obviously in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, I want to win worlds, I got to be, grinding it out, making sure I'm there every day, doing my work, but at the same time, yeah, you need that. Doing other things, getting your mind off it, right? Because if your mind's, like, preoccupied by just powerlifting, you're just gonna drain yourself mentally. And I think I was watching a video. I think it was, like, Silent Mike and Mark Bell's channel there, and I think he, like, recently was just saying, like, he had to do a set, like, Silent Mike had to do, like, 5:15 for a 5x5, and he's like, you know what? Like, you see a lot of guys going in there and getting jacked up for every single set. And then by, like, I don't know, a week or two, then they're just so mentally drained because, you have to psych yourself up for every single set, right? And it's just like, I don't know if people do that.
Yeah, I mean, great point.
I have one training partner, and Rob Rooney, who he gets psyched up for every set, man. He takes ammonia for every set, and I don't know how he does it. I get tired just watching him. Like, I just can't. I don't go into that, like, maybe 1 set a week I will get psyched up for. And that's something, like, I remember reading a long time ago. I think maybe Dave Tate wrote an article about it. He was talking about that mental reserve that you can't drain it continuously.
And just think about draining that reserve continuously, day in and day out, week in and week out. It's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. Yeah. It's just like, you can't drive your car at, full speed and full acceleration all the time, or it's going to burn out, right? And I think it goes back to having that balance where it's like short, very focused times of intensity and very heightened, psychological state is fine. But then, switching gears, whether that's after competition, when you do have a down time to, focus on other things in life and have your workouts a little bit more relaxed so that it's more sustainable. Okay, that's the bi-weekly powerlifting wrap up.
All right, and without further ado, this is our interview with Maggie and Mallory.
This week on the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, we're sitting down with 2 fantastic ladies of powerlifting, 2 fantastic ladies of Ottawa
And we're not in Ottawa right now. We're actually down in Los Angeles, and we're just hanging out at the beach mostly. We decided to sit down with them because we're all in the same city. And that's Mallory and Maggie. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Welcome.
We have to do some admissions first to start this episode because Mallory listens to the podcast every week that we release an episode because she's our LVD Fitness sponsor. So we're going to get into that a little bit later. But Maggie is first-time podcast guest, first-time podcast listener. She's never listened to the podcast episodes.
I've listened to some.
So why don't we start with Maggie? So Maggie is a athlete who qualified for our national team this year in the 63 kilo junior class, and she's training for the World Championships in 5 weeks. So Maggie, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into powerlifting and how you feel about being in powerlifting?
I got into powerlifting when I met my coach, Justin Reeson. I met him through our university, and he ended up starting to train me just as a friend, and now he is a full-time coach. And he ended up co-founding the Ravens powerlifting team at Carleton University, and he influenced me to try out, and when we were on the team, you had to compete. So I did my first meet in February 2014 at Seneca College. It was a university meet, and I just fell in love with it.
So the Ravens Powerlifting Club is this really interesting powerlifting club that seems like it is like the most professional club, powerlifting club in the country. Like I remember going to Ontario Junior Provincials and just seeing like at least 20 athletes just from this one university team. So I know that you guys met on that team. You guys actually did your first meet together. Maybe I'll turn it over to Mallory to just talk about more about Ravens Powerlifting Club. Like, what is it? You know, you guys as coach obviously co-founded it. You know, like, why do you guys think it's so successful? There's so many fantastic athletes competing with that club.
Yeah, for sure. I think powerlifting in university demographic is really growing right now. Like, even when we go to the school gym still, you see people who, you know, they have Addy powers, they have belts, like they really want to get into it. They're constantly asking people from the team tips for their squats, for their deadlifts, stuff like that. So I think it was a good timing match because there's really a need right now for that. And we've noticed every time we go to a meet, like other people from other schools are asking us questions about like the backside of it, like how they got it started or what you have to do every year, things like that. So for us, it was really great because it did push us both to do our first meet because neither of us were planning to be powerlifters. You know, people just kind of convinced us to join this team because we were strong, and then the next step was you had to do a meet. So we were like, okay, I guess we'll try this. And then for us, it was really great, obviously, because we both fell in love with it. And
can you just talk about who are the athletes that are competing with Ravens Powerlifting? Because there's actually a number of athletes on that university club. We're going to Worlds too.
So some of the originals would be like Eric Willis, Phil Brome, Justin Reeson, who we mentioned, Josh Reyes, the other co-founder of LVD.
Trent was an honor.
Yeah, Jackson Spencer. They're trying to grow the team right now from the bottom because a lot of people were kind of in third and fourth year at the same time. So we all kind of moved on. So a lot of these lifters are actually competing either just at this past Seneca meet or at the Ottawa Open for the first time.
Cool.
That's awesome. Can you guys tell us a little bit about your nationals experience this year?
I had a really good meet at nationals. I ended up going 9 for 9, and I hit PRs in every lift. And I ended up placing third. I got the bronze medal, which after a little turn of events became silver, and has earned me a world team spot.
That's awesome. Now, is this your first nationals?
That was my first nationals.
Your first nationals? That's awesome. I know, Mallory, you had a booth and stuff set up there. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so nationals was really great for us because social media is awesome for fitness because everybody's on it and everybody's really engaged on it, but it's cool to put some faces to names, and we have lots of people that come up and they'll be like, oh, like I've been following you guys for so long. So it was cool to meet people in that context and just get a little bit of engagement, ask people what they want like from us, what they like about us, what they'd like to see. So it was really great to just be on the ground talking to people and meeting so many great athletes.
And then yeah, sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
I was going to say, Mallory, do you want to take a step back and talk about your business, LVD? Give us a little background on, why you founded it and the branding around it.
Sure. So LVD is a powerlifting apparel company, and for every item we sell, we provide 1 month of clean water to a child in a developing country. So it actually started with myself and Josh Reyes. I had a project at Carleton for an entrepreneurship class, and I was tired of wasting all this time on projects for fake products. So I was like, I want to work on something that I'd actually want to do. And then Josh and I were talking, and we always followed the company 10 Tree. So they're a Canadian company, and for every item they sell, they plant 10 trees.
Saskatchewan company, Saskatchewan, right?
Yeah. Their head office was like a few blocks away from Nationals. But so we followed them, and we noticed a lot of people our age were wearing it, and we just totally got it. It made sense for a company to give back. It's so easy to do. And at the same time, we found that there's kind of a lack of powerlifting brands. There's a lot of like bodybuilding and those kind of companies, but there wasn't a lot that we felt fit us. A lot of the powerlifting brands are like really hardcore with skulls and stuff, and like that's obviously not me and Josh if you've never met us. So we came up with something that we felt represented us. And what we've been seeing so far is that a lot of people felt that way too, just the simplicity of it and a clean logo. It just, same thing as Ravens Powerlifting. I think there's a timing play, and it was something that a lot of people felt there was a need for.
I think there's like a lot of people in powerlifting, obviously, who really like attach themselves to that side of powerlifting that is very, very hardcore. Like, like hardcore music and hardcore like mentality and like you said, like skulls and bones and sorts of things. There's obviously, and I actually think it's like the majority of lifters don't attach themselves to that sort of side of the sport. And so do you think that's one of the reasons why like LVD has seen a lot of success early on, is because it's something that people can be proud to wear? Like it is kind of like a little bit more like fresh and cleaner and not as like, still powerlifting, but not as like hardcore.
Yeah, totally. I think we just have a lot of the same values of most people. So it's a brand they can get behind and they know they're not going to regret it later. There's a lot of heat on kind of who you associate with in powerlifting, just because, especially if you're in like CPU, IPF, right? So I think it's a company that people know they can get behind and that they're going to be proud to be associated with. Yeah, and I think a lot of those original brands that were really hardcore and skull heavy, a lot of it is just like somebody printed some t-shirts and they're just still printing t-shirts, whereas we've really taken a community approach to it, and we spent a lot of time before launching about thinking about where it's going to go and things like that, and people see that side of it and see us at all the events, and they know it's something that's going to stick around.
I just want to turn to Ryan here, because Ryan and I were involved in powerlifting, for the last 10 years, and Ryan, when we started, like, there were not a ton of brands around powerlifting, and it's really interesting because obviously you with Inner Strength and SVD, like, we're kind of in this interesting growth stage of powerlifting where you can actually get companies branding themselves around powerlifting. How do you feel that, like, in the development of the sport to be a positive?
So I'll talk about Inner Strength for a second. Like, that was Rhea's business, obviously, to start. And it started as a company because she wanted Canadian powerlifting clothing, right? And there wasn't anyone making any. So she decided to found Inner Strength Products and do that. And I think it was kind of, like you said, the kind of right time to kind of start that kind of stuff, because there wasn't a lot of companies out there. Like Mallory said, there was a lot of bodybuilding brands and stuff like that. There was a few powerlifting brands like House of Pain and a couple like that. But like you said, there are a lot of heavy death metal kind of styling and stuff like that, and that didn't really fit with everyone's mentality or everyone's style. So I'm certainly not going to be a person who walks around with a skull and crossbones on my chest and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a very interesting time in the growth of powerlifting in Canada. Has allowed these kind of smaller companies to start up and grow and flourish with that growth, and it's really positive, right? I mean, what Mallory's doing with LVD with donating water for every sale is, I mean, it's awesome, and I'm glad you mentioned Ten Tree because it's kind of a cool company that started just down the road from us, and it's a very popular brand around here, and I always think it's really cool because it's a brand you see all over Canada, and because they have that kind of social world impact, that people can feel proud to wear it. So
yeah, it's really cool that like on social media, like I see so many people wearing LVD, like just in their pictures and videos, and there was a time in powerlifting where like I like to think that like I knew everybody in powerlifting, maybe not like their names, but I would know their faces. But now in powerlifting, like there's so many athletes and people involved, and I just see on social media like just all of these like powerlifters that from far and wide, even across, not even in Canada, who are wearing LVD, which is so cool. You talked about how you spent a lot of time up front thinking about where LVD was going, and what sorts of things you see it doing. Like, can you just maybe talk about that future vision?
Sure. So part of that is, like I said, a lot of people, slapped a logo on a shirt kind of thing, but we've looked at, where LVD can be as a company, but also within it, like how we can break it down. Like lift, visualize, dominate as a process, but it can also be 3 different strands for people. So the visualize will do more things that focus on the social aspect. So whether that's making clothing that speaks to that, or participating in more events that are centered around the charity aspect. And then dominate is things like where our sponsored athletes that we just launched comes in. And we really just want to be a support system for the community, because that's something we've really noticed is there's just so many niche things that anyone who powerlifts gets, but anybody else doesn't. Like even we'll do some social media posts that say something about like the color of your squat shoes, and like people just engage with it because that's relevant to them. And seeing a picture of a big bodybuilder in a stringer isn't necessarily relevant. So I think we just want to be that support system too. And we get a lot of people who reach out to us even with questions for their first meet. So I think they're just seeing us as somebody in the industry who's approachable, which is what we want.
And you talk about having some sponsored athletes that you're starting to bring as part of your team and part of your brand, and Maggie being one of them, which was just launched very recently. So Maggie, how do you feel about being an LVD sponsored athlete?
First of all, I'm extremely honored. Like the other athletes that are sponsored by LVD are just amazing athletes, and to be associated with them on that level is it's amazing. I never would have expected to get to this kind of spot with the sport when I started, and it's just a nice feeling to be part of something that feels so much like a family. Like they support you, you're associated with them on social media, on everything, and it's just they really like have your back. So.
And you have some quite big names. Can you talk about who you actually have for athletes?
Yeah, so a lot of people actually reached out to us after we launched this and asked, what it is that we looked for in our athletes, and it wasn't like a cut dry, like we didn't have a list of things we wanted. Part of it is like a gut feelings, and a lot of it is those values I talked about. So we balanced our athletes with some who have, major accomplishments already, with some that we see a lot of potential in. So Maggie would be one of those ones with potential, and as we know, like she's going to the world's team. And we also have another 63 lifter, Christine Castro. So I think a lot of people have been seeing her lately. She just hit 390 in the gym, which is unofficial open record for squat. So someone like that, at first, you might not understand why, because she didn't even do a nationals yet, but we can really recognize that she has that potential. So Maggie, Christine, and then Alyssa Smith. She's 72 lifter, previously 84 and 84 plus.
Who really gave Rhea Stin a run for her money at nationals this year.
Yeah, so anyone who's seen Alyssa lift from the gym or meet. She's a force to be reckoned with. And then we have Bryce, who I won't butcher his last name, but Calgary Barbell. If anyone else knows how to say it, feel free.
Krawchuk.
There you go. So we have Bryce, and then lastly we have Ray Williams, who's a 120 plus kilo from the U.S. And these are people that we also feel have supported us from the beginning, and that's something that's big. You know, they weren't people that reached out to us and were like, hey, how can I get some free stuff? They're people who have been buying from us from day one, always seeing what they can do to help too.
Awesome. Actually, I just want to turn back to Maggie for a second. How's your training going, like leading up to Worlds? Can you kind of brief us down on kind of what your template looks like? And yeah.
Right now I'm training 5 days a week. It's pretty intense. I have 2 of those 5 days I do squat, bench, and deadlift. 4 out of 5 of those days I'm benching, which is something very new to my training. My coach thought that would work well for me, and it actually is working really well for me. So far, no pain or anything like that. And I'm deadlifting 3 times a week. 2 are conventional. 1 is sumo, so it's a bit lighter. Squatting, I'm doing front squats, beltless pause squats, and then 1 day of heavy beltless or belted squats. I've always had an issue with my hip, call it the stanky hip.
The stanky hip. I love it.
So I'm trying to figure that out, and my coach, Justin, he's implemented these pause squats and front squats, which I really think are helping. So yeah, everything's going well. When we found out that I'd be going to Worlds, I was a bit concerned whether or not Justin would be able to make that work well, and he said he had in mind kind of a maxing out of sorts. So he turned things around and started prepping me for Worlds, and it's so far going really well. You
mentioned Justin, and I'll just for context, I'll just say that he actually is joining us as an intern coach on the team this year at Worlds, and he's going to be working with the juniors and sub-juniors, so it's kind of cool that your own personal coach is going to be joining us on the national team, which is awesome because not a lot of athletes get to bring their personal coach because the CPU names the coaches for the team. And you mentioned your template, and I think Justin's also working with you on some, this is actually, Nationals was actually your 3rd meet.
Yeah.
So Worlds will actually be your 4th meet. So how do you actually feel about going to Worlds so early in your career? Did you kind of expect it after Nationals, or like did you even have it on the horizon, or it just kind of came up and you're going with it?
More so it just kind of came up and I was going with it. Going into Nationals, I was hoping to place. I was hoping to do well, but I didn't want to tell myself that I was planning to go to Worlds or that was necessarily a goal of mine, because I didn't end up not being able to go and be disappointed. So I just kind of, from the beginning, I was like, I'll do provincials, I'll do Nationals, and then we'll see where it'll go from there. But this is my last year as a junior, so I'm really glad I had the opportunity to go to Worlds this year, because it might be a while before I have that opportunity again.
Just taking a step back to your training template again. So you said you did like back-to-back like heavy bench days.
Yeah.
How do you find that with like recovering stuff? Is it more just like a mental thing, just being able to hit like heavier weights like 2 days in a row, or?
I think it's really boosting my confidence with bench press.
Mm-hmm.
Never been one that I'm super comfortable with, and my coach has me playing around with my grip. So, for example, on Friday I was doing heavy singles at 90% with my competition grip, and then on Saturday I was doing heavy singles mid grip, and just playing around with speed and all that sorts of things, I think, is just really helping me find my groove with the bench. So I'm playing around with all these different aspects of it. Yeah.
So I want to turn over to you guys. Have you guys ever programmed something like that before, where like 2 heavy bench days back to back? And if so, like, do you find that there's like a particular candidate for that style of training? Like, I know in my mind, like, there would be like certain individuals who might not be able to handle like 90% loads back to back, even with a grip change. Do you find like maybe like women or like lighter weight classes might be able to handle something like that, or?
I think it's obviously individual dependent again, right? Like if you're gonna have 2 heavy days back to back, depending on how many days you're benching again, I mean, if the volume is lighter on those 2 days of the week, then yeah, I think it's probably a safe go. But if you have like a pretty heavy volume day on, say, a Thursday, and then the Friday, you hit a heavy single with that mixed grip, and then you're doing some volume, and then the next day you're coming in and still doing another one, it might, I don't know, your recovery may be affected. But I guess you can train that over time, right, and probably be able to like adapt to that and get used to it. Yeah, I think it's individual dependent. It could work, right, for some people.
Yeah, I think like Steve said, it's something you could train to do.
Yeah.
I've never specifically trained that for anyone or programmed that for anyone. But like myself, I did 50 days of max squatting in a row, right? So if you can max squat every day for 50 days, you can definitely max bench. I find benching is less strenuous, and I can recover quicker from that. Personally, I'm not going to do that for myself. I have very fragile shoulders, so I have to be very kind to them. So, but no, I think it's definitely something you could definitely program and do. I definitely know some of my athletes that could handle it, given time to adapt to it.
And how would you actually build somebody up to do like a protocol like that? Because I know like a lot of our listeners, like when we mention a protocol, they go and they try it the following week, and I think that there might be some sort of like need for like a build up period where it's like, okay, like don't just jump into something where it's like, because obviously Maggie is like well adjusted to something like this, and she's able to handle those sorts of high intensity loads with that frequency. But like, how would you maybe build an athlete up to that?
First, I'd build frequency, and then I'd build intensity. So once you can handle benching multiple days in a row, then you start building your intensity on top of that. So you'd build one day as more intensity, and then slowly build your second day as more intensity as well. It would take time. It'd probably take, I would say, 3 to 4 weeks to be up to speed if I had to guess at this point.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. Frequency first, and bump up that intensity, and then even not even bringing it like all the way to the chest with that other like mixed grip day, more like just boards or spoto, just reduce that range and just slowly bringing it down so you don't end up taxing yourself as much.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned boards, Steve, because I think that's one great tool that you can use in bench press that you might not have those sorts of tools. And the other two lifts is that you can use boards as a way to like increase your intensity, but also save your shoulders if you want to still have that high frequency training. Going back to Maggie, she is 5 weeks away from Worlds. I'm hoping that maybe there's starting to be some like goals being set, sort of goals in mind or things that you want to accomplish. Any expectations?
Well, at my previous 3 meets, I've always gone in with the goal of going 9 for 9, having a strong meet, but this time I really want to push myself. I really want to go hard with those third attempts and just see what I'm capable of, because I'm not going in with a goal of placing or a goal of necessarily like ranking too high, because that's would be an unrealistic goal. So I just want to really go in and have the best meet that I possibly can, and just really have my coaches help me push myself to my limits.
Sure. Do you ever find yourself like nervous in a meet setting, or got some meet jitters? I mean, everyone gets the meet jitters, but do you find yourself like overly nervous, or are you pretty confident, calm?
I stay relatively calm. I usually have trouble sleeping the night before, but that's about it. And then this is the first time I won't be waking up at 6 a.m. For a meet, so I'm hoping that'll help. I like training later in the day anyway, so maybe that'll help.
That's your advantage, yeah.
Yeah. I like to make light of the day as much as I can and laugh a lot and have fun.
So, like, Maggie, like, I'm going to be coaching you, like, at Worlds, because, like, all of the juniors, including yourself, should I be, like, slapping you and, like, hitting on the back and, like, screaming in your ear? Or, like, are you the kind of person that's more, like, just, like, calm words?
More so calm words. Justin likes to do this thing where he pinches my ears, and I hate it. I hate it so much. I'm so mad. But I think that's why he does it and why it works, because it's not not as.
Do you tell him? Do you tell him that you hate that, or?
Yeah, he knows. It's less aggressive as like a big slap on the back, which he thinks it's necessary, but.
Well, and he definitely knows you well, because like he's done it to me too, and I'm like, don't ever do that to me again, and he never has. So he knows that
like,
works for her.
Was it just like randomly, like you're going up to your last like deadlift attempt, you'll just start like pinching your ears, or was it like just from the start, like get go of your squats, or?
Yeah, it was at the first meet I did, and he was like, "Okay, I'm gonna do something right now. I'm gonna pinch your ears, and it's gonna suck." And he did it. And I was so mad. I was like, "Why would you do that to me?"
So it kind of worked then. That's good.
Yeah, and he always gives me that little warning, like, "I'm about to pinch your ears." Start getting so angry.
I'm about to cause you some physical pain.
Yeah.
So Mallory, what's next with you? What are you doing next for a competition?
Well, right now I'm doing a longer training session to go straight through to provincials at the end of October in Ontario. It was something that was really important to me. Even going into nationals, I kind of knew I wanted to do it because I've done a little bit of training back to back, and I know that I had some things with my lifts that I could work on, and I really wanted to be able to take time to work on that. So right out of nationals, like, I only recently started doing belted work, and still I'm only doing it like once or twice a week. So that was really important to me. Like, I spent some time even working on figuring out how to better use my breathing. Justin and I took squats down to like, it was 185, and I would do pause squats, and I would actually use the mirror and work on like my knees caving and things like that. It's been really great so far fixing all that stuff, and I'm really excited for when I compete. And another aspect of that was with LVD. Like, we're going to be at a lot of meets this summer, and I know a lot of people in Ottawa and Ontario who are competing for the first time. So it's also important to me to be able to be there for those people, because there's so many of them that are going to be either first day lifters or they're just all competing. So I think it's good when there's people who can be there, you know, just running around. I just keep telling them I'm going to get them all Skittles and water and be that person.
I'll pump Mallory's tires for a second. She placed third at nationals in a competitive class, and but it's kind of nice to have a little bit of a longer training cycle to work on some of those technical aspects, because I find like when you have meets back to back, even like a 3-month period between meets, you still have to keep the intensity fairly high, and it might not be like, you might not have the time allotted, you know, to some training days where it's like, okay, this is going to be more of a technical training day. I can lift a little bit lighter. I don't have to keep the intensity high. I can actually focus on some technical aspects or work on variations, like work on, you know, belted stuff or beltless stuff, or work on pause squats or variations of the movement to help with those technical components. Like, I don't know, Ryan and Steve, like, would, you know, when you have longer training cycles, is that more like front end programming? Like, would you try to like get more behind the tech, like adaptations in technique during those longer periods, or do you try to like at all times have a technique goal, even if it's like back-to-back meets where, like, you know, you might only have 2 months to like train for your next meet? I'm just thinking, like, I have some athletes like who went to Commonwealths and then went to nationals, and it was a really quick turnaround, and we really had to kind of keep things moving along, and not a lot of times to pull back and work on technique.
Yeah, like with that example you just gave there, like the back-to-back meets at Commonwealth and Nationals. I mean, if an athlete wants to do it, there's, like, as a coach, there's, like, in that situation, like, you have to still keep them building, right? They're, like, the couple weeks after, yes, you'll do some, like, regeneration, like, technique stuff, just to give them a little break, and then, again, you're going to have to hit it hard, and it's just the nature of it, right? It's just a couple weeks out, and you got to do what you got to do, right? But, yeah, when you have that longer period, like, for example, when I competed at Worlds in June last year, and then not till Commonwealths, I had a good, like, 6-month period. And that month after, I mean, took a few weeks, not even hitting over, like, 70% of all lift. Just corrective exercises, postural stuff like that, right? Just give your body a break, and it needs it. And then slowly you're going to be, like, working up again and getting the volume in and slowly creeping up on that intensity, or else you'll have a mental breakdown.
For me, like, for personally me, I like to have a meet within 12 to 16 weeks. It helps keep me focused. So right now I have the same kind of break that Mallory's talking about. Like, I lifted at nationals, and that was kind of, you know, half-assed anyway. But I won't lift now until August, and that's a really long break for me. I know I need it because I'm coming off an injury, but it's tough to hit with the same kind of intensity that I like to. So for me personally, I like to have meets. Even if I don't take them 100% seriously, I'd rather do a meet in 12 weeks and treat it as like a heavy training day, and not deload after that, just go back to training normally. For athletes, though, like, you know, I have a lot of people who, you know, they're not going to compete like Mallory. They're from Ontario. They're not competing until provincials. So yeah, you're going to work on technique and work on a lower percentage and work on higher volume, and it's a building phase, and it's something you don't get with that short turnaround cycle like the 2 months between Commonwealths and Nationals. There's no time for building. You're basically kind of just rebuilding and trying to get back to maybe small PRs, but it depends. I mean, it also depends how experienced you are too, right? A newer lifter, 8 weeks, you can probably make gains. As someone who's been in the sport for 10 or 12 years, you're probably not going to make any gains in 8 weeks. You're basically going to try and get back to the same level you were.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with that too is like if you have an athlete that kind of like starting with you and they're like, oh, okay, I want to work with you for a year, and you kind of like lay it out a lot better, and you kind of, even some meets that aren't as important, you can kind of, not do the whole taper and peak for that meet, just kind of go in and do whatever, and you kind of still be building around the different meets throughout the year, and it's kind of just more of a yearly periodized cycle, which is a lot more beneficial for coach-athlete relationship rather than if you're just like coach hopping and doing that. I don't know.
I find it's really important to have summer meets in your schedule because it's really easy to like take workouts not as seriously when it's like there's so many other fun things to do.
Yeah.
So when Ryan like talks about like wanting to have a meet like every 12 weeks, it's just that meet puts a little bit more pressure on your training days to not to take them a little bit more seriously and to make sure that you're getting your workouts in, so to speak. And not going having patio beers and.
Well, if I can add something to that too, I know Rhea and I were talking about this at Nationals, and I think it's more of an issue for girls than guys, but cutting weight for meets, like I know a lot of people sit above their weight class and cut down, and I was talking to Rhea about it, and she said she eventually just like actually cut herself down so that she didn't have to do that anymore, because for girls sometimes it can be more work and it can be more frustrating. And that's something that's big too with women. It's if you do back-to-back meets and you're always doing like a water cut or something, it's not as easy to naturally lose that weight because your body just wants to rebound back up. So that was something for me too. Like I'm working hard now instead of doing like the patio beers and stuff. Like I'm doing a slow cut now so that I'm still as strong going into provincials, and I don't have to worry about how like it's going to affect me if I'm cutting before.
So I've been hanging out with Mallory and Maggie for the last few days in LA, and I've been able to see some of their eating habits. Maggie had this like wild dream where she woke up and she was 84 kilos, and she had to like then go weigh in at World. Obviously, she's a 63 kilo athlete. So there has to be some sort of stress on your mind where it's like, okay, I got to make weight. But you also track a lot of your food, like you track like how much you're eating and like in terms of your macros and everything like that. Like maybe can you just touch on that like just a little bit in terms of like how important that part of your training is leading up to Worlds?
Well, I'm sitting a couple pounds below my weight class, so I'm not stressing about actually weighing in as 84 kilos, but I just really enjoy the whole process of tracking my macros. I find it brings me like peace of mind, and I just like having control over that aspect because I also treat it as just another part of training. Like you need to fuel your body, you need to make sure you eat enough so you can have good training sessions, eat enough pre and post workout. I find that like timing is really important. So I just find that if I slack on that, it's just the same as slacking in the gym or not putting everything you have into your workouts. It's just another aspect of training.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that because we had Brittany Bergen on the podcast last episode, and she was saying how that's a very important part of her training as well. Like just as you become more advanced as an athlete, and as you want to kind of have more serious goals and get to that next level, like just making sure that you're tracking everything and making sure that you're being very scientific with everything is part of the process. Because you don't want to leave any stones unturned. You want to make sure that everything's accounted for. How can we find you, Mallory and Maggie, online if people want to get in touch with you? Where are you socially on the internet?
Check out my MySpace now. Either my Facebook or LVD's Facebook. My Instagram's just Mallory Rowan, or at LVD Fitness. Josh and I recently started vlogging, so you can check out Abby in my LA series, just being classic Abby. That's just Mal and Josh on YouTube.
Perfect.
I'm on Instagram. I'm also in Mel and Josh's vlogs. But on Instagram, it's complicated to spell. But
Magsakajuka.
Magsaka, it's MAGSSAAKJE.
Or just search Maggie Morgan. That's probably the
For that, work.
Cool. We want to thank you for coming on the podcast. And definitely go follow LVD Fitness. Check out some of their cool new stuff.
We got some new stuff coming out, so follow us so that you can see it.
So Mallory's going to be giving away an LVD T-shirt to one of our listeners. And Ryan, how can they get their hands on it?
They can go to our website, www.canadianpowerliftingpodcast.com. Click on the contest page and fill in the information, and we'll pick a winner on. They can go to our website, CanadianPowerliftingPodcast.com, click on contest, and then fill in your information, and we'll pick a winner on June 6th. So you have till June 6th to enter, and then we'll pick a winner and let you guys know after the next podcast drops.
Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for Maggie and Mallory for coming on the podcast. To win the LVD original T-shirt, go to www.canadianpowerliftingpodcast.com under the contest and enter to win.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next episode.
This episode was brought to you by LVD Fitness, where LVD stands for Lift, Visualize, and Dominate. Visit lvdfitness.com to pick up your CPU-approved swag and follow them at LVD Fitness to find out which events they're coming to near you and to catch a sneak peek of their spring collection. You've been listening to the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, the podcast that brings you the best of powerlifting in Canada, hosted by Stephen Cassioli, Ryan Stinn, and myself, Abby Silverberg. Please follow us on Instagram and check out our website for some great free powerlifting content at www.canadianpowerliftingpodcast.com. If you like what you heard today, please rate our podcast on iTunes and don't forget to listen to every other Thursday for a brand new episode.